Okay, good morning. So as we approach the last days for Rosh Hashana, Mamish tomorrow, so I'm going to continue called the soul of Rosh Hashana. So last week I covered some of the Mamorim, some of the themes. I'll cover a few more now. And obviously they're all connected with the Yesod, the foundational point being, as the Alter Rebbe writes in Gersa Kedesh, Simin Yudalad, that tomorrow, meaning at Rosh Hashana, before the sun goes down, the world goes into the worlds of the Arizal as well. The world goes into a state of sleep, spiritual sleep, like a coma, somewhat. In order to, and awaiting anxiously to and anticipating its renewal, which will be through the tefillas, the prayers and Tchiyah Shefer of the Idna on Rosh Hashana, because we're part of the process. I explained this a little last week, but more at length last week, just to sum up. So Chassidus calls halos man, the halaw of mayim nukfin, is the aveda that comes from the bottom up. That's what we do. On Loshen Hanigla Tamlichuni Alechem, that who's Mamlich, who crowns God as king, is the Am, Melech B'layam. So of course, Chassidus has the question then, really from Eitz Chaim, but so what happened the first Rosh Hashana? Meaning, first the Eibishter created the world, he created the human being. So there's the expression, Allah Asman Minei Ubei. Then the Allah Asman was within the Eibishter himself, so to speak, Kav Yachol. The Eibishter envisioned, but there was no tzaddikim yet, so how could he consult with them? So the Eibishter envisioned, the Lashon, the Magid gives the mashal of a father, even before the child is born, he can envision, he imagines what his child will look like. Now by the Eibishter, of course, his imagination is not just an imagination, it's a reality. So the Eibishter envisioned, so to speak, what will be when there'll be neshamas and they will do the Aveda. So that's called halos man minei aved. This deserves its own conversation, discussion, what that means exactly. Because obviously, if the Eibishter can do that on his own, what does he need us? But clearly it means it launches so-called existence. At the end of the day, it's Nesava Kodesh Baruch Hu L'Yisleis Baradir V'Tachtenim. It was the Eibishter's taiva. Nobody else initiated that. So it all starts from one Beidah, from one creator. But the process is that after that, then the Allah Osman is dependent on us. So therefore the Alter Rebbe says, that's why it is the Tfilis and Shefer of Avodas Adam, which in turn awakens Lamaila a new Rotzen and a new Tainug for Melucha. And as a result, you have the renewal, what we call Tiku B'Chedesh, Chedesh, from also the word Chidush. There's a Ir Chodesh and Mechudesh, a new unprecedented energy enters into existence that never was there before. And this is the classic concept in Chassidus of before every Yesh, there's always an Ayin, Yesh, Ayin, Yesh. So essentially, the previous year, in this case, Tavshin Pei Gimel, would be the Yesh that began with Rosh Hashana, Tavshin Pei Gimel. It comes to the end of the year, it goes into a state of Ayin, Aistalkus, and like I said, Stalkus Ha'ir, and then when we Mamshechit Anu, it's not going back to step one, to square one. It's an Ir Chodesh that never was here before. That's the new Yesh. So Yesh Ayin Yesh, which is always a process of growth, which explains also why it has to happen this way. Why can't the Eibishter just be Mamshech Ha'ir and it goes for 6,000 years? Why does every year have to be back and forth, Aistalkus and then Hamshachet, and so on? So in human beings, we need it because, when you hire someone, you can't hire them for a lifetime because it may not work out. So you have a contract that expires either end of the year or end of a few years, and then you renew it. But Lamaila, it's not exactly like that. So the answer is because you want to have something new. You don't want it to be just a continuous effort. Just like it says, the Alter Rebbe writes, ask L'Kutei Torah, why why is it that we start counting every Sunday from day 1 again? It should have been 1 through 7, and then the next Sunday would be 8, and then the next one would be 15. In other words, the number should just continue. Why does every week begin counting from beginning? It's a good question. So in the secular world, the answer is it's just practical. It's not practical. So things are broken down by week. Nothing is happening on Sunday exactly. It's just human beings had to create some type of invisible structure. So we create a Sunday, a Monday, and so on. And every week begins a new week. A month we can all understand because it's the cycles of the moon. So every new month means a new moon. But what about weeks? The Alter Rebbe answers that it's not the same thing. Time is energy. So Sunday is the energy of Chesed, and Monday is Gvura, all the way through Friday is Yesod, and Shabbos is Malchus. Shabbos Malchus. So once the cycle ends, you start again from Chesed. In other words, Zman is constantly repeating itself in the sense it's a cycle. So it's not just flowing. Or in the Lashon of the Zohar, why did it say Sheishis Yomim Asa Hashem Elokim Es Hashamayim V'Sa'aretz? It should have said B'Sheishis. During 6 days God created, not 6 days He created. It's missing a word. So the Zohar says because Sheishis Yomim, that's what Hashem created, was the Sheishis Yomim too, the 6 days. Kol Yema V'Yema, every day has its purpose. So you see from this that Zman is not just a flow from Ovar, Heva to Asid. It actually is a cycle, or even better, a spiral, because it returns to the same point, but not exactly to the same point, because it's on a different axis, which also explains why birthdays and what all the Yom Tevim. That's not just, why that day, because on that day there is that energy. So Rosh Hashana has its unique so-called energy. Same thing with every person's birthday. You're not just remembering because you were born that day so many years ago. It's on that day is a repeat of whatever was going on, the so-called the chayes, the keiches, what called in English the energy of that day. Okay, so that gives somewhat of a summary of the Etzem Muhus of Rosh Hashana. So I'll go over now is to a few things that did not discuss. Number one is that this year there's also something unique. Shabbos. Rosh Hashana Shechali is b'Shabbos. So I want to discuss that. The Rebbe said there was always, he would first talk about Rosh Hashanah or about an Inyan B'chlal, then he'd talk about the Kfiyas. So this is a central point, and halacha for sure, because of the Gzeri Derabah that due to Shvus, because the fear that people may carry the Shefer, because not everybody's a Boki. Not everybody's a Boki in Hilchus Shabbos and so on. So they may carry the Shefer on Shabbos, so the Gzera was made, B'zman Ba'yesheni, that we shouldn't sound Shefer. Which of course is the Alter Rebbe, as a Maimah Yom Tov Sharash Shon L'Kutei Torah, and you've probably seen almost all the Rebbeim, not almost, I think every Rebbe has a Maimah like that, at least one, where they all the big question, what does that mean? Do Gzera, Takona, because of Kali Das or Amaratzim, they take away a mitzvah sesa daraisa from Klal Yisrael, which is Shabbos. You can find some Eitzah. So clearly there's something more going on here. So we want to discuss that. Obviously, technically speaking, in Zman Abayis, Bayis Rishon at least, they did blow sound Shefer, because in the Beis Hamikdash there was not this Chashash. And Zman Bayis Sheni, the Alter Rebbe talks about that, because that's when the Gzeri began, so it's mashma there that already in Bayis Sheni they were also not sounding the Shefer. So how do you explain this? So briefly, all the Maimorim, every Maimon has a little different take on it, but it essentially comes down to one thing, which is a central principle in Yiddishkeit B'chlal, and that is that we're never deprived of anything. If we're saying you can't blow Shalom Shefer, whatever the reason is, means that it's not like we're missing something, it means that we're getting it in a different way. The Rebbe would very often speak about the days when you don't say Tachnun. It's not like you're missing Tachnun, it means that day is Mamshech Tachnun. Derech, when we say on Shabbos you don't put on film. So I'm missing the mitzvah of film? No, Shabbos itself is the os, is the sign. I mean, Shabbos is Mamshech, what film is Mamshech? Which, by the way, just I think one of you asked me this question last year. People has the question, you often get, why a woman can't put on tefillin. Why not? I mean, we have, of course, we have Michal Bashal, we have the daughter of Rashi, and so on, but those are exceptions. So I was once asked this question in a somewhat of a controversial setting. So I said, on Shabbos, do you put on film? No, why not? Of all days of the week, when's the best time to be Meshabed Halev HaMeach, which is the mitzvah of film? The best time is Shabbos. It's the highest level. The answer is, the technical answer is because we already have an os. So you have 3 aces. So you have 2 aces on every day, signs. So what's the big thing? You put on film on Shabbos, you have 3 signs. No, because when Shabbos is mamshach, kol ha-mesiv gereya, you don't need to add. And the answer is because Shabbos is the hamshach of film. What is Shabbos? Shabbos is malchus, malchusah, which is nukve. It's the level of the feminine energy of malchus, levona. So I say, so a woman is all weak. She has a certain Shabbos-dika quality. It's not the pshat that she's deprived of it. It means because she has it already within her. Just like you say, Isha can demand the milah damya. It's not something that's missing. It means because she has it. The hamshach, whatever it has to be, the hamshach. And it was very interesting. There were a few women that came over to me afterwards who were very big feminists. Today they're a different world, but I don't mean another world. I mean to say they've changed their lives dramatically. But there was a big part of it was that conversation I had with them because they never thought of it that way. You always think of it like you're taking away something from someone. So to apply the same idea, Shabbos and Shefer, it means that the reason there's a Gzeira is not because the Gzeira is the technical, how it manifests technically, but the Eibishter would never have made a situation that a Gzeira, because of Amaratzis or Kalidas or people who don't know the halachas, you deprive someone from Shefer. So the real reason is because Shabbos is Mamshach, what Shefer is Mamshach. And what is that Hamshach? So let's talk about that Hamshach. The language of Kabbalah that Chassidus quotes is that Shefer is the level of Bina, and previous Bina is connected to Atik, to Tainug. That's why Shefer is Mamshich Rachamim. Shefer has all the powers to be Mesakin Pegomim, the wounds that are cause of people's transgressions, and also to reach in the deepest parts Lamaila. Shefer Shel Ayel is Bina. Shabbos is also Bina. Lamata Lamaila, it's Malchus, but if you go Mat Lamaila, Bina is the last of the spheres. You don't count Chochmah. And there, Shabbos is also Bina, or to put it in more practical terms, Shabbos is Tainug, Einig Shabbos. V'karosel Shabbos Einig. So Shabbos is the Hamshacha essentially of the Einig of Shefer. So why then and I'll explain this in a minute a little more, what that means. So why then do you sound Shefer in the Beis HaMikdash? So the language of the Alter Rebbe is because there are many lab daragas in Einig. Regular Einig, you get every Rosh Hashana through Shefer, and Bechutz La'aretz or Bigvulin outside of Eretz Yisrael, you are mamshich on through Shabbos. But in the Beis HaMikdash, everything is of course on a higher level, and there you could be mamshich even a higher level of Shefer that is not nimshach through Shabbos. So deeper level of Einig. Bisman Bayesheni, because it was a Yerida already, and the Gilei Elokus was not in the same level, so that's why the Gzeira was Chal, and therefore they don't sound the Shefer, their Shabbos is Mamshech of the Sinyan. So let's talk a bit about this thing called Einig. It's a big question, B'chlal. I'm sure you learn the Chassidus, Tainug, Rotzen, Atik, Arich. And I find, all the way back from my yeshiva days, it was never explained, what does this mean exactly, Tainug and Rotzen? People, Chachma Bina Das, pretty much, is, everybody, I'm saying it's not, we don't necessarily have perfect understanding, but it makes sense. Chachma is a conception and a kudah. Everybody knows, you get an idea, falls in your head, like a flash, spark, it's Chachma. Bina, you flesh it out. You take the idea and develop it in details. Similar to like Mishnah and Gemara. So Mishnah, it's a Nukudis. Gemara, it's elaborated upon. And Das is either the conclusion or the Hiskashrus, the words of the Alter Rebbe and Tanya. The connection, the binding to it, the Hakora, the Hargosha. Chassidus says different ways of explaining Das. But when we come to Tainug and Rotzen, so the usual translation everybody has is Rotzen's will, right? And Tainug is pleasure. So what's the first place we look at when we say will and pleasure? We look at ourselves. You have all kinds of ritzenis. There's a lot of things you like to do. There are a lot of things you want to do, I should say. You want to take a walk. You want to eat a meal. That's Ratzon. And Tainug is when you have pleasure. You can have pleasure from a good piece of a good piece of food. You can have pleasure from Gashmizdika pleasure. There's Ruchnizdika pleasure. There's all kinds of Tainug. There's pleasure from listening to Nigan. That's our usual take on it. But if you think about it, that's not really adequate, because when Chassidus talks about Ratzon and Tainug, it's not just talking about two things that we happen to have. We talk about it as keches makifim. The whole point of Ratzon and Tainug is that it's keser, and it's higher than chokhmah. So how is that explained? So again, the next stage of explanation is that before the Eibishter created chokhmah, or his maitzel, his netzal chokhmah, he had to have a Ratzon lechokhmah. That's keser. The Ratzon, the Eibishter first wanted something. You can't build a house if you don't have a Ratzon. Chassidus even brings that times that the person, Rachmana litzlan, there's even an illness called mania, I think that Chassidus uses the word, where everything is working inside a person, but they don't have a Ratzon. They simply have no will. So there's a discussion what that means. Is that a person who's depressed? Like some people just, everything is working, but they just wake up and they're just not in the mood. I don't mean not in the mood to the point that even you can't force them because they're just not there. Or some people say, it's like what today's medical terms, it would be like everything is functioning and but the nerves are not communicating properly. The mind is not communicating properly. You know, some people, Rachmana litzlan, suffer a stroke. They say they want to move their hand, but they can't. So it's not that they're, something, the Ratzon is there's a hefsek between the Ratzon and the Pu'ula. However you explain it, but point of that would be, so Ratzon is the Eibishter's desire to do something, and what he does, so the Eibishter first had to have Ola B'Ritzeinei. He had to first arise in his desire to create, and then he creates. The same thing by us. The Ratzon, before you do something, you have to want to do it. Tainug is even deeper, because Tainug means that the pleasure that drives the Ratzon. Like, why do you want? So, of course, there's a whole discussion in Chassidus and Samach Vav and other places, which is higher, Ratzon and Tainug. There's sometimes like this, sometimes like that. I'm not going to go into that right now. It's not so relevant here. The Rebbe, however, does have a lot of explanation on this. There's a lot of Tzetlach notes that the Rebbe wrote. There's also a Sikha Vayeshev. If you're ever interested in a very interesting Chidushim from the Rebbe, Pasha Vayeshev, Tovshin Lamed Zayin. The Rebbe answered then questions that we asked about the Fabreng Yutas Kislev, about Ratzon and Tainug, and the Rebbe spoke about it. And there the Rebbe made it very clear that after all the Shakva Tanya, Ratzon and Tainug is higher. There are in certain areas, Ratzon, sometimes like we say, what's higher? Torah and mitzvahs. So in some places it says mitzvahs is higher, some places it says Torah is higher. But at the end of the day, or the Tainug is higher because Nesava Kodesh Baruch Hu, everything begins with Nesava, and Nesava is a language of Tainug. It doesn't say Nisratza HaKadosh Baruch Hu Liyas Leis Baruch. The Rebbe explains it there. It says Nesava. So Tainug ultimately is higher than Ratzon. Obviously we have the concept of Ratzon as in a Ratzon B'lei Tam, or we talk about the Eibishter Shteik, Achola B'machshava. But even there, Chassidus says there's a Tam, even for a Tam Komus, for Ratzon. Bottom line is, these are two forces, Ratzon and Tainug, that are within the Mashpia before he's Mashpia. Now, you could ask the question, what is this all negated to us? Ma'inaf Kamina. It's very nice, dissecting how human beings or how the Eibishter works, but there's a deep reason for this. Because there's a big shaila in Kabbalah Chassidus. It's a shaila that I'm sure you've heard and expressed in different ways. And that is, at the end of the day, the Beira and the Nivra are two opposites in every possible way. The Eibishter is a creator, we're a creation. The Eibishter is Bli Gvul and Ein Sof, and even beyond Bli Gvul and Ein Sof, we are Gvul. The Eibishter is Mitziusim Atzmusei. The Eibishter the Mitzius comes from within his own etzem. There's no Ein Dover Eises Atzmei. Everything else has a makir. There's nothing in this world that doesn't have a makir. Every one of us have parents. Parents have their parents. Goes all the way back to the beginning. So there's almost nothing in common between us, the Beira and the Nivra. So how could we have a relationship, B'chlal? It would seem to make sense. The only relationship we could have is like a Eved and a Oded, like a master and a servant, or a Melech and a subject, a king and his subjects. But there's nothing in common. So you could ask the question, maybe there is nothing in common. And the Eibishter, for whatever reason or no reason, we don't know, Nesava, he wanted to still have a creation, and we should do Torah mitzvahs, and it gives him nachas ruach. We'll never understand how and what. But now that, especially in Primis HaTorah, especially in Chassidus Chabad, is not sufficient for two reasons. Because number one, there's mitzvahs in the Torah that are not just mitzvahs maisis. If it's an Eved and an Odin relationship, and there's nothing, Odin, Eved does not have to have any feelings for his Odin. He just follows orders. So then we should have only had mitzvahs, follow orders. But we have mitzvahs like V'haftas Hashem L'kecha. And we have mitzvahs V'yadaita Hayayim V'shavesa L'bavecha. And we have mitzvahs Ta'asa L'kei Avicha. And Leman Tira, Yiras Hashem, Avas Hashem. These are more than just you give an order to a servant. These are relationship mitzvahs. How could you have avid to something that's infinitely distant than you are? So that's number one. Number two, the way the Eibishter created us, he then should have created us like animals. Insects never ask this question. They have no relationship. The distance between us and an insect, the Eibishter is much more distant than us. And insects don't have seichel and they don't have midas and so on. Why did the Eibishter create us with all these faculties that cause us to think and cause us to question, and of course free will and so on? In other words, we were created with Tselem Elokim. That's the additional point. And that changes the whole equation. That means it's not just a relationship between two opposites. There's something in common. The Eibishter made that there should be something in common. He didn't just take Vayikach Hashem Elokim as Ofer Min Ha'adoma, but Vayipar Ba'apav Nishmas Chayim. The words of the Zohar Tanya Perek Beis, B'techi Yusei Nafach. That Chelik Elikam Emal Mamish, that Neshama is B'dugma Le'mayla, Dama Le'elyon, Tzelem Ed Katzamenu B'd Musenu, that we have something in common. Why is this so relevant? Because that changes the whole equation. In a way, this is the yesod of Chassidus Chabad, to understand now, how do you build such a relationship? So understanding that the Eibishter has Rotzen and Tainug, and Keiches, Chochma, Bina, Esses Fides, is a critical component, because without that, we have no relationship. In other words, we can look at ourselves and say, I have Chesed. So from that I learned that the Eibishter is Chesed, all the way in Chesed Avatzilus and higher. I have a Rotzen, that teaches me about the Eibishter's Rotzen. So what Chassidus brings quite often, the Rebbe explains it many times, says, Malchusa da'are came Malchusa de'rekia, regarding Rosh Hashana in Yad. What does that mean? All these Mishalim in Medrash, Kemoshel Melech Basav Adam, hundreds of times, if not thousands of times. So the obvious question is, what do you mean Moshel Melech? The Eibishter is like a Melech Basav Adam. Shlei Berech. So the answer is no, he created a Melech Basav Adam to give us a taste of what Melech Malchei Amlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu is like. So everything Lamata is really Kagavna is a moshel, or a dugme, or a hishtalshalos from what is Lamaila. So basically, the Eibishter could create the world like this. 1 second, created the whole world. Why did he need 6 days to create the world? What? You ever thought about it? Try creating something. A person who can't create can't do it in 6,000 years. 6 days is not going to help. You know? And if you could create, you can create in 1 second. So why did Eibishter stay through 6 days exactly? And then he ran out of energy, and then goes to rest on Shabbos? Obviously, that's not the pshat. It means, because he created, like I said before, 6 days is the order. He wanted to create a structure that should make sense to us. Of course, he could have created Yesh Ma'ayin, the whole thing. The truth is, he did create it that way. Bereshit Bara Rashi says everything was created right then, and then each day it comes out Megillah Mehelam El Agili. But the point being is that he created a structure that we, us human beings right now, can take from our own anatomy, our own beings, we can understand godliness. That's a chiddush. It's a major chiddush. Because the Eibishter is be'etzem shlei berach. He could have not done that. So all the discussions in Chassidus about what is Ratzon and what is Tainug is really coming to explain how the Eibishter is showing us, I didn't just create the world. First I had a Tainug. Then I had a Ratzon. And then the Ratzon turned into a Chachma and a Bina and a Das and a plan. And that's how we also create. You want to build a house, you want to build a business, anything you want to do. What do? You start first with what's your tainug in it, what's your rotzen. And then comes the next levels, the plan, the chokhmah bina das, the midas, and so on. So with that, let's go back now to Rosh Hashana. So Rosh Hashana, we say, is the chiddush from the level of tainug and the rotzen, l'melucha. We're going back, so to speak, to the engine room. The whole year, the Eibishter already made the decision, the tainug and rotzen, we're building, the house is there. Now we have to live in this house, and we have to do the Aveda to keep up the house, meaning the world. Make a didi b'tachtein. Rosh Hashana is a day when everything is chezel l'kadmusei, back to the original place. So it's really a gift, because it means the Eibishter is saying, I'm allowing you back into my innermost, if you want a lack of a better word, my innermost super consciousness, my deepest place, where I planned it from the beginning. In other words, throughout the year, you can connect to me on the level of, let's call it the workers level. You know, how I'm implementing it all. Rosh Hashana, you're able to access all the way to the tainug. And that's why he gave us a special mitzvah called Shefer, because Shefer has the power to pierce the heavens, and the Eibishter invested in it a certain power that is able to go through all the levels. Usually Avedas Hashem, Al Pitam V'das, you learn Torah, you have Avos Hashem and Yiras Hashem, Midas, V'yadai Tayem, V'shavesa Levavecha, Das Alekei Avicha, V'avdua B'lev Shalom. And then you bring it down to mitzvahs. Torah, Veda, Milas Chasadim. Mitzvahs is, all the mitzvahs, Ben Adam L'chavere, Ben Adam L'mokim. But all these are connecting to implementation through the Torah, mitzvahs, and through Torah, Tefillah, and mitzvahs. Then Rosh Hashana comes that you're connecting to the Eibishter not through the actualization of it, but back to the source. Back to the source, where you can actually have access to why the Eibishter's very desire for it. Now, sometimes the long which Chassidus brings in these Maimorim is that there are times you connect to the Rotzen Hashem, and sometimes you connect to the Baal HaRotzen. You've heard this expression, especially around Shuvah. So the Rotzen Hashem is what he wants us to do. Sheker Yishanim mitzvesa v'tzivanu la'niach tefillin. Al atifas talis, al achilas matzah, al tilas lulav. Those are the mitzvahs, the rots, the tzeinis. But then there's the Baal HaRotzen, the one who actually wants it. When Moshe was asking the Eibishter for forgiveness through tshuva, he was going back to the Baal HaRotzen. That's not so easy to do, but we have access to do that. So Rosh Hashana is going back to the Rotzen Hashem, and even more that to the Tainug. So you're able to go straight into the engine room. And Shefer has that tchuna. Every mitzvah has its tchuna. Shefer has the power to do that. That's why you see blowing Shefer doesn't have anything to do with seichel. I mean, yes, you need to have a little seichel, the chokhmah and training to sound the Shefer. But the very mitzvah itself is not using your mind. You're not learning Torah. It's not Igiyas HaMeach. It's not Igiyas HaLev. It's not a mitzvah of, that's a mitzvah taluya b'lev. It's a maisa, and in a sense, it's like a chok. It's a chok, because why Shefer? The Eibishter could have made something else. So it's really going to what Chassidus calls l'mayla metam v'das. What's l'mayla metam v'das? Keser. So we're accessing that our relationship with Hashem is not just with Hashem's chokhmah, bina, das, chesed, gvura, teferes, netzach, yesed, malchus. It's a connection with the Eibishter's very rotzen. If you want, the Eibishter's etzem. Now obviously both rotzen and tainug are not etzem mamish, Chassidus explains, but it's closer to that, and they reflect the etzem more, because you want to know what you're like. You can know much more what you're like, not from what you do, but what you want. You know, if you want to get to know somebody, you don't just look at what they're doing. There are people doing a lot of things. People work in different jobs. And you'll ask somebody, tell me, is your etzem mahus a carpenter? Your etzem mahus is a computer programmer, a banker, a lawyer? A shliach maybe is etzem mahus, because shluch shalom kamei. But most people's jobs don't reflect their etzem. It's what I'm doing. Even an artist, you make a piece of art, does that piece of art reflect his etzem? It may reflect part of who he is, but that he's also a father and a husband, and he could be 100 other things, a Talmid Chacham. Ratzon, on the other hand, is not defined by a specific thing. It's what you want in life. And Tainug even more so, what gives you pleasure, what gives you, these are what's called Keiches Atzmim, or otherwise known as Keiches Makifim. They reflect the whole nefesh, not a specific aspect. Chachma reflects your chachma. Bina your bina. Rotzen and tainug reflects your more or less the entirety of the same thing. Lamaila. If you want to know what the Eibishter wants, he wants a dira b'tachteinu. How? The details is tayag mitzvahs, but that's already details. That's the pratim. The klal is rotzen and tainug. So Shefer is able to take us like an express train straight to the source, and that's what gives us the power to be me'erid the rotzen l'melucha b'chadash, the chidushim that I was describing before, a new world, new energy, new possibilities. So that's what Shefer is. Now Shabbos, Karasel Shabbos Einig, Shabbos the same idea. Not quite once a year, every week, but what is Shabbos? I mentioned before, the Eibishter created the world, Sheishes Yamim, created the world 6 days. Then it says, B'yema Shabbos, Shabbos HaMenucha, Shabbos HaMenucha, V'yichul HaShamayim V'aretz V'chol Tzvam, etc., etc. V'yish Beis. So you learn like a child. It sounds like God got tired and then he went to rest. Obviously, that's not pshat. Lo ba'omu b'yigia. It means, in the language of Chazal, or from Zohar, that lav urchen de malka, the milidad is lav urchen de malka. When the Eibishter creates the world, he's involved in something that's not rotzen and tainug of Elokus. He's involved in the creation. He's building. It's like building the house. On Shabbos, Vayichul HaShamayim, the Eibishter goes back to the mucker of it all, the tainug of it all, why he created the world. And that's why we emulate that. The same thing, 6 days of the week, our mitzvah is to work. Sheish Yom Tasa Kol Malachtacha. And as the Sifri says, that it's a mitzvah sesa to work as well. People think it's only a mitzvah to Shabbos, but it's also a mitzvah to work. And then comes Shabbos. Shabbos, as it is Lamaila, it's a day where it's not a day to be involved in material activity, whether it's business or money or travel or whatever material, the Lamates Malachis. It's a day to focus on the purpose of it all. The purpose is what? That it should all be elevated to Elokus. That's why Kol Malachta Chasuya, Misha Torah Be'erev Shabbos, Yechol B'Shabbos. Shabbos is the tainug that comes, both that precedes the Aveda and that follows the Aveda when you finish the job. Like when you finish building a house, you have a certain pleasure from the conclusion of the project. So Shabbos is essentially the Hamshach of Einig, just like Shefer is. And that's why when it comes Shabbos, Shabbos is Mamshich, what Shefer is. But we all said, like I said before, when you talk about Ein Sof, there's no limits to how much Einig there is. Based on Mikdash, you're able to Mamshich in a higher level of Einig. So how do you explain that? So that also can be explained by B'sari Echzel Lekah. All of us, I'm not talking here about grobe pleasures or things that Chachmon al-Islan are Dvarim Asurim, but even in physical things that are Mutarim, Dvarim Mutarim, you have pleasure in something. There's always a deeper reason. Why do you have pleasure in this? There's a pleasure, in other words, behind the pleasure. Like when you say pleasure, someone, there's scientists try to understand why do we enjoy certain foods. Why do some people like this food and other people like this food? Why are we drawn to things that are sweet? So yeah, it makes sense. Something is sweet. It's sweet to the tongue. Feels good. But what's going on here? What's inside of us that's being triggered when something gives us pleasure? Every type of pleasure. So today there's all kinds of terms, dopamine and the serotonin and all kinds of chemicals that the brain releases. Recently I was reading that when somebody smiles, Pasha Begashmis, even if it's a fake smile, the way your mouth turns generates chemicals in your brain. It makes a person happier. Yeah, it confirms what it says in Chazal and Chassidus. A smile. That's why the Rebbe brings from Zohar many times when people write to the Rebbe about Atzvus. So the Rebbe says, remember what the Zohar says, that when you show Aponim Atzovis Lamata, reflects that way Lamayla, Kamar Odam, Kamayim Aponim Laponim. When you show Aponim Secher case, meaning Simcha Lamata, it brings Simcha Momayla. There's a lot that's discussed on this. So you see that that a physical pleasure is never just a physical pleasure. There's always a reason behind it. So from that alone, instead there's a tainug is a tainug shebet tainug and tainug shebet tainug. So when you think about it, why does the Eibush have pleasure, for example, from the Aveda of what this brings in Bas Legani, from From Sapcha Chashechel Nehera. Dafke from the Hapach Zayin Cheshech Ta'er. There's particular pleasure in that. So Chassidus brings because it's like a tzipur medaberes. You know, you don't get excited by a regular bird, but a bird, you suddenly see a parrot speaks. It's a chiddush. To take darkness to turn into air is a chiddush. It's a novelty. You know, that's why we take things for granted, but you see something unique. But how gufa kash, the Eibishter is nispol from a chiddush. Human beings can be nispol from a chiddush. So Chassidus goes and says, no, it's because the tainu, because it's mamshich, a whole new level of elikus. Because when you mamshich air, there was already air before. When you take cheshech to air. My point being is that in pleasure itself there are many levels, and since the Aveda is to connect to Hashem on all levels, so the tainug, within the tainug, etc., etc. And there's no limit of how high you can reach. But one more point I want to make about this, and that is, and yet, also on Rosh Hashana Shecholi is b'Shabbos, we still say the psukim, Malchus Zechrein Shefres. As Chassidus explains, why do we say the psukim b'chlal? If you're sounding shofar, why do you have to say the psukim? So one of the reasons is because you always bring a raya from Torah. Like from that we learn also why we say ataresa simchas Torah, to bring a raya to the simcha of simchas hayem. So in Torah, that's what you do. You first bring a raya from the psukim, and then you do the mitzvah. Or the other way around, you do the mitzvah, then you bring the rayas. But it goes deeper than that. The psukim are also hamshacha. You know, kimus svosav hava maisa, like kol ha'esek b'teres eles ki ilu hikriv. So when we say the psukim, it's like we're being mamshechet. So the point being is, even on Shabbos, when we're not actually blowing shofar, the gashmi is dika shofar, it doesn't mean there isn't a ruchni dika shofar. So that's why even on Shabbos you say the psukim. So it also has the maila of what shofar would have on a regular day. So this is just a summary of what this is, this kfiyas, and somewhat in our personal Aveda. So I want to just translate it into very practical terms. You know, what does it mean practically speaking? So you connect to the tainug of the Eibishter. So by Chassidim there's always an expression, there was the idea of bringing nachas to the Rebbe. How many times have you heard it in your childhood? Brings nachas to the Rebbe, right? Again, the Rebbe nachas. And I mean, it's a nice expression, especially if you give nachas to parents, and definitely to the Rebbe. The Rebbe gave us work to do, and you want to make the Rebbe satisfied. The Rebbe, of course, is Shama Klolis and Ish Alakim, so it's really bringing nachas to the Eibishter. But the Rebbe is the one that actually, the shliach that gave us that particular work. Nachas is a tainuk thing. It's not a specific thing. It's not like the Eibishter, the Rebbe gives you a shlichus, you can go do a specific detail. Obviously, the shlichus consists of a detail, you have to do the detail. But when you say nachas, ruach, lefonai, shamati v'naseh etzeni, that's a tainuk thing. It's a general tainuk. But what's the point? The point is like this. We all know when the Mishkan was being built, so we have Moshe tells Betzalel that he should build a Mishkan. How does it begin? After V'yichuli Truma, so it begins. It starts with the Kelim, the Odin, the Menorah, the Mizbeach, the Shulchan, the Mizbeach, and the order that goes. And then he starts talking about the Yeriyas, the walls, and the coverings, and so on. Later we read, when Betzalel starts building it, he builds it the other way around. First the Yeriyas. And the Gemara explains that when Moshe told Betzalel how to build it, Betzalel said, that's not meaning a elam. You don't first build furniture and then you build a house around it. First you build a house and then you bring the furniture in. I mean, I'm using my words. It's not the words from the Gemara exactly. First you build the binyan, then you bring the kelim. You don't start with the kelim and then, where are you going to put the kelim? I mean, it's a normal thing, right? You all live in houses, I'm sure. First you had a house and then you ordered the furniture. And Moshe says, you're right. B'tzel Betzalel had particular chokhmah. You're right. Okay, the Klotz Kash, 1 second. Moshe, I mean, he was not maybe he wasn't the architect of the Mishkan, but it doesn't take tremendous seichel to understand what Betzalel says. What was the Havamim? So there's different explanations in the Maimarim. One of the explanations is that Moshe was the visionary. He's the Ish Aliki, he's the person who's bringing the Torah. What's the vision? What's the goal of the Mishkan? The goal of the Mishkan is the Kelim. It's not to build Yeriyas as an end in itself. Is to serve, whether Ladas HaRambam, the Mizbeach, Karbonis is the Ikar Aveda, Ladas HaRamban, the Odin is the Ikar. But bottom line, it's Kelim. It's the Aveda Samishkin, Aveda. For us in the Migdash was B'Shechanti B'Seicham. And B'Seicham is through all these Kelim. So Moshe was speaking from the point of vision. Betzalel was the architect. He's the builder. A builder is focusing on the details. It's not his job. So Moshe was speaking how he sees it from the vision of it all. Betzalel speaking that technically you build, like we say, Seif Maisa b'machshavet olav machshavet chila. Seif Maisa machshavet chila. Machshavet chila is the Seif Maisa is the end. What's the end? Is Kelim, the Aveda. But in between, you have a whole Seder Shtalshlus, and you have a whole way of building a Beis HaMikdash, a Mishkan. And that's Betzalel. What's the real story? What's the story behind the story? That we need to know both. Sometimes you get so caught up in details. I'll just use a business example. You build a business, and it's a very complex business, and people get so caught up in the details, and the boss sits down with everybody and says, 1 second, do you know why we run this business? And many people say, I have no idea, I just know what I have to do. In other words, when the details get disconnected from the vision, from the Yisod, it's a problem. You can be involved, there are people that we know. I don't want to speak in any way negative, but especially before Rosh Hashana, people who are Mekayim and Mahadir in every Digdug Kal Shel Divrei Sofrim, but they don't even know there's an Eibishter. Or they forgot about the Eibishter a long time ago. That's why Baruch HaBatera Tchilef, you can learn Teira, and in Chaz V'Shalom, you learn it like a science. And you forget that there's a Baruch HaBatera Tchila, and Nesan HaTeira, it says Seif Soft, Teira Azevu. You're going to forsake Teira too. Because when you get caught up in the details and you forget the Yesod and the Klal, that's a major problem. Obviously, just to have the Yesod, the foundation, and you don't have the details, you also don't have the fulfillment. That's why you need both. So it says Rosh Hashana is Kabbalas El Malchus Shamayim Kabbalas Kloli, El Kloli, Al Kol Hashana Kula. Then comes Kabbalas El Mitzvahs, the details. And I just true, Rosh Hashana also has its Mitzvahs Pratis, but overall, it's about connecting to the foundation. Why are we doing this in the first place? Why is there a world? Why do we exist? What's the purpose? So when we say giving nachas to the Rebbe, you're saying there's, yes, the details what I do, but then there's an overall bigger picture of what is being fulfilled, the shlichus that we have in this world to fulfill. I think I mentioned my father-in-law, when he went to the Rebbe Yechidus these days, his birthday was around this time. And it was Tafshin Yud Aleph, first year. And the Rebbe gave him a bracha for his birthday. He said to him, der Rebbe soll helfen, als a Teil von den Inyanim, was der Rebbe gewollt eisführen, soll sich eisführen durch dir. A beautiful bracha. You could use it for, if you have to give anyone a bracha for a birthday. That the Rebbe should help, that a part of what the Rebbe wanted to accomplish in this world should be accomplished through you. For Chassidim, this is like unbelievable. Because it means the Rebbe who was given the Shlichus Kloli and knows what the Shlichus of a Deir is, our Deir Hashvi, for example, and that you could be Zechet to be a part of that. So yes, you may be only doing one part, but that part should never be disconnected. It's to the biggest Nachas Ruach of the whole picture, the Tainu Kloli of what the whole purpose is. And I remember when Bochum was starting to be sent to yeshivas, so there was Australia was in the Chofs, Chav Zayin, the Rebbe sent the first shluchim to Australia. But then later in the Lameds, Yeshiva New Haven, and Los Angeles, and Cincinnati, and Seattle, different places. And I remember one of I think it was Lamed Vav. So the parents went with their kids, with their sons, to Gan Eden Tachten. And the Rebbe said a few words, gave them, I think, maybe either a quintus or a dollar. And the Rebbe said to the parents, interesting expression, he says, I don't know if I ever heard the Rebbe say it any other time, but then he said it. He said, "Adank verbringen Sie Bizaher und nicht weiter werde ich sie nehmen auf meine Places." That's what the Rebbe said. That thank you for bringing your children till here, and from here on I'll take them on my shoulders. And I remember afterwards verbringen about it. And, for Chassidish parents, there's no bigger bracha like that. Excuse me. Because it's not like Chaz V'Shalom, the Rebbe is taking away the children. On the contrary, you train them, you prepare them, now they're ready to go into the big league, so to speak, and the Rebbe takes it upon them. And I remember that had such a tremendous impact on the Bachrim that were there. Some of them were my Chaverim, and on the parents. The idea that you're part of the big army of a shlichus for the whole generation. Just a dugma muchshis of that means that we connect the details to the Rosh Hashana, the Reish, when the Chidush and the Tainug Rotzen of the entire Bria Se'elam. Kavana Klolis and the Kavana Pratis come together. Actually, a very fascinating Maimon, Adein Elam Mem Gimel, where the Rebbe speaks about it. It's Mugit, about the difference between Kavana Klolis and Kavana Pratis. Al Kaponim, some summary about Yom Tov Rosh Hashana B'Shabbos. Everyone have a very good Gebench to Yar, Ksivach Simateva. I'll see you in the new year, as they say. And good Gebench to Yar. Shavia Shnas Geula, Pratis Geula Klolis. Next Thursday, we're on?